All right, this time we'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll ask Councilman Andy Nakhan to lead us in the word of prayer, and Councilman Patan lead us in the pledge.
We, the members of the Lafayette Consolidated Council, having been chosen to represent the people of this locality, beg of Thee, Almighty God, to enlighten our minds so that our work will be just and fair in all things. Give us the courage and strength to fulfill our duties according to the laws of the land, and in so doing, fulfilling also Thy holy will on earth and in heaven, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Welcome, everyone, here to tonight's meeting. Hope you had a great day. We welcome you to the City Parish Council meeting. We, as your representatives in the Lafayette Consolidated Government, welcome your involvement and encourage your participation. This is a public hearing. If you wish to address the council on any item on this agenda, please fill out a blue request to address the council form, noting the agenda item number. The blue form is available to you in the foyer, and you should submit it to the council clerk, Ms. Veronica Williams, seated to my left, prior to the call of the agenda item. It is important to fill in the blue form completely and note the specific agenda item number about which you wish to speak. If the card is not completely filled out or is not eligible to the clerk, you will not be given the opportunity to speak. If you have materials you wish to submit to the council, please give those to Ms. Veronica Williams along with your blue form. In an effort to allow everyone an opportunity to be heard, the 5-minute rule will be in effect. Speakers shall refrain from debating, personal attacks, and from making confrontational or derogatory comments. I'm requesting that the first row to my left be used for media only. Lastly, food and drinks are not allowed in the auditorium. And please, all phones and electronic devices be silenced from this point forward. Our meeting procedures are by resolution and not by Robert Rules of Order. Documents, including agenda, ordinances, resolution, and minutes related to the meeting are posted online or referred to the web address on the top of the agenda. That web address is LafayetteLA.gov, www. The council encourages your involvement and participation by volunteering for boards and commissions. If you are interested in finding out which board suits you, please call 291-800 or pick up a pamphlet at the door. Couple of chair announcements. Due to the March 4th being Mardi Gras, Lafayette Consolidated Government and the LPA meetings will be held on Wednesday, March 5th instead of March the 4th. The next meeting will also be on March 19th. First two meetings in March will be held on Wednesdays, March 5th and 19th. Because of the charter requirement that ordinances lay over for 2 weeks, the meetings in April will begin on the second Tuesday of the month as followed: April 8th, 22nd, April 29th. The regular schedule will resume in the month of May, with meetings going back to the first, third, and fourth Tuesdays of the month. Quick announcement: the first meeting for our LCG Needs Funding Source Committee will be held tomorrow, February 26th at 6 p.m. in the large conference room at the City Hall. The public is welcome. All right, moving over to council announcements. Councilman Boudreaux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Craft is here, but I just want to announce we postponed the opening of Precinct 4 today due to the projected weather conditions that never did come, of course. And we do apologize for that, but we ask that you continue to listen and watch out for when that will be rescheduled. We're looking at a date post Mardi Gras schedule since the officers are so busy, but we felt that that location and the history behind that building was too significant to bring out folks in inclement weather and not give them the opportunity to appreciate and enjoy what this government and that community has worked towards. So again, for those who did not get the message and went out to that location, we do apologize for that. We put out a lot of announcements, my office, Chief's office, about the postponement of that event, but we ask that you please do still come out when it does actually happen. It's a beautiful facility, a beautiful con, and some great things are going to happen because of that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other council announcements? All right, seeing none, go ahead and move over to the executive president's report. Mr. D. Stanley.
Mr. Durrell will not be here tonight. He's on city parish business. Nothing to report tonight except first pitch at 6:30. Just a friendly reminder.
Okay, is he at the ball game?
Yes, sir. No, he's not.
Wait, you sure about that? Well, watch it now, watch it.
Asked if I were going to watch the ball game. As far as you know, he's not at the ball game.
Okay, that's right. You'll keep us updated, right? You're UL or LSU? I know you graduated at LSU.
Yes, the answer is yes, UL. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure, just checking. Okay.
Go Cajuns.
That's it. All right, moving along. Okay, we have land use ordinance reviews. Just want to let you know this is a public hearing and the blue sheets are available for anyone wishing to address the council. The 5-minute rule is in effect. Jeremy, can you please read?
And 4-1.
Okay. At this time, we'd like to call someone from PZD. Please introduce yourself. Are you Ms. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Gary. I work for Planning, Zoning, and Development. This is a request for land use for Don's Wholesale Services off of Alexson Road. This business is going to fall into the general business category in an arterial district. The proposed business will be a mechanic shop. Based on the review, it was determined that the applicant needed to provide, and let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. Along the northern property line here, a 15-foot green belt and a 6-foot site-proof fence. Along the southern property boundary, which is here, a 20-foot green belt and a 6-foot site-proof fence. And along the western property boundary, which is here, they were to provide a 15-foot green belt and a 6-foot site-proof fence. There's no conflict here because this is the public road. Due to an existing home, and I'm going to scroll up to the site plan. If I can get this to work. There we go. 2 variances are requested along the southern property boundary. You can see here and here is an existing house and an existing metal building on the property. What they're asking for is where this house is encroaching right here, and only really the corner of the house encroaches into the required green belt. They're asking to reduce the 20-foot green belt where the corner of this house encroaches to 10 feet, and then to reduce right here where the metal building is encroaching from 20 feet to 1 feet. Because again, this house is existing and the metal building is existing. So those are the only 2 variances they're asking for. They can provide the green belts and the buffers everywhere else. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Councilman Terrio?
Ms. Gary, the home that's to the north of it, if you can go back to the overview of the satellite, have we had any inquiries from any residents nearby? There's only one home that appears to be on the north side.
Okay, and I'm sorry, we're having mechanical failures here. This is not all our normal equipment. We had some issues with the audio stuff. I meant the visual part of it. To kind of give you just a background, because this kind of started at platting. This property platted through the hearing examiner, and when the property platted, we did have some neighbors came out. They were concerned about the fact that, you know, he was going to use this as a commercial business. Not necessarily that they had any issues with him platting the property, just some concerns about the commercial use. So we told them, listen, when he's ready to use this as a commercial business, he will have to go through this particular land use review, which will provide them some protection as far as him providing fencing and green belts. They said they were okay. In the meantime, he owns his car business. It's like a used car lot, I guess you could call it, is on Johnston Street. And he was, I think, parking some of his overflow onto the lot. We sent out a violation letter. when we got the call from the neighbor saying that, he was parking the cars there, and he had not come through land use at the time. We sent out a violation letter. He cleared all the cars up and went out there to check, make sure everything was good as far as the site. There were no cars parked on the lot. He had up his required sign. We sent out the letters to everybody notifying them of this meeting, and I have not, since we sent out the violation letter, I have not heard from any of the neighbors, nor have I heard from anybody since I sent out the actual notices to everybody within 300 feet.
Okay. And in your opinion, if we were to grant these two variances just on the corner of the house and the shed, everything else would have the fence that would protect that northerly neighbor?
Yes, sir. Yes, he's required to provide fencing along everywhere, but basically where he fronts on the street.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Ms. Gary.
You're
That's all I have,
welcome.
sir.
All right, Councilman Bellard. Oh,
Is anyone from Don's Wholesale or who's representing him here to speak?
Don's here.
can you come up and speak, sir? Can you introduce yourself for us, for the record?
Donald Mendoza.
Okay. Councilman Bellard.
Basically, the only complaints I've heard was when you take the 18-wheelers and you go on Telejean and you block the road. How often does that happen, and is that going to continue happening?
It probably happens every Monday. We're trying to figure a better way out with it, though. We've actually been unloading more towards in front of G&H and Maurice is what we've been doing now.
Okay, because like I said, that's the only complaint I've gotten when the 18-wheelers blocking the road, and then, as you know, the gravel road substandard on the side.
One of the plans that I do have, there's some property on the other side that I like to try to buy. If you see the blue, and you see to your right, they got that shed, that property right there. The other side, right there. Tells Gene right there, if I can buy the property and go up a little bit, up there. If I buy that property there, I'm actually do a turn in right there so the 18-wheelers actually can pull off the road and unload and load. I just haven't done that yet.
Okay.
That's the ultimate goal, though. Because it does cause a lot of headaches. And like I said, we're unloading and loading in Maurice now at G&H.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Bellard. I'm not seeing any other discussion at this time.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Appreciate it. All right. Oh, Councilman Shelvin.
I'd like to make a motion that we grant the appeal.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to grant the appeal, second by Councilman Castillo. Any other council discussion? Seeing none? Any blue cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Go ahead and call for the vote.
District 1?
No.
District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
No.
District 6?
Yes.
District 7? District 8?
Yes.
District 9?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
All right. Reports and discussion items. Jeremy, can you please read the first one?
Discuss downtown DDA parking management.
All right. Councilman Shelvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I'd like to call up Mr. Nathan Norris. I think he has a presentation that he'd like to make to the council and also kind of talk about the situation going on downtown with some of the parking meters and parking situation. And I yield the floor to Mr. Norris. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Councilman Shelvin. I really appreciate the opportunity to come before the full council and explain where we are. Essentially, what I'd like to be able to do is outline in this presentation one of the immediate needs that we're going to have this upcoming year is to more actively manage parking. And that's not we, the Downtown Development Authority, so much as is the parking department that falls under Public Works. And so we've been working with them, and we wanted to just give a relatively short presentation that outlines these key issues for you. Let's see if our clicker can work. Can you put that on full screen mode?
Are you going to be speaking from the middle, sir?
No, I'm just trying to get
I'll
closer
just
to
turn the
him
middle
to-
mic on just in case if you...
Well, can I actually speak from here? This
Absolutely.
This may be better because I don't think this has the full range.
Okay.
All right, there we go. All right, so essentially what we'd like to be able to do is get a little feedback, because my expectation is that based upon some of the feedback that you provide us today or after this presentation, will be fed into how Public Works sets up their budget to be managing parking for 2015. So that's the purpose. Parking is a big issue for us. And the reason is, we first have to ask, why does it even matter? And the reason is because the downtown matters for us. From an economic development perspective, it gets down to trying to retain and attract talented workforce. Right now, our community provides wonderful opportunities for people to experience a rural lifestyle. We offer wonderful opportunities to experience a suburban lifestyle. We don't have high-quality city living. As many of you know, the downtown has all sorts of wonderful things going on, from the most events in the region to our biggest employment center, to our cultural hub, to schools, churches, you name it, we have tons of things. But what we don't have is a bunch of people living there. And that's a huge issue, as far as I'm concerned, for our region, because we need that as an option. To get there, and by the way, this is going to become even more important over time, as we look at Generation Y. Generation Y are those people who are 30 and under. They have an abnormally, radically larger appetite for urban living, unlike any of us, okay? And that's causing a change in buyer preferences that we're not accommodating right now. We don't have to have anybody advertise any of the apartments that are available downtown right now, because they're eaten up immediately just by word of mouth. So we've got to be able to prepare for this by providing this option. Now, this relates, it's also a quality of life issue. Even if you never, rarely go downtown, just maybe you go downtown for special events, you get to experience it. The more important issue is for those who don't experience the downtown, it is a quality of life issue as it relates to their other family members. That's one of the common things I hear. It's about how people are disappointed. People are moving to bigger cities and things like that, a younger generation. And this is a good way to keep a lot of our talent here, as opposed to driving off to, like this image, where they use Cajun movers to take somebody to Houston. So we need to stop that. The other big issue is just for visitors. When we deal with visitors, if you want to find out about a city and you just Google the name of the city, what you're going to see is images pop up. It's always the image of the downtown. So for better or worse, either it's a huge asset or it's a detriment, or it's sort of in between, and we've got to deal with that. This happens to be the #1 image, with the downtown being the centerpiece when you Google the word Lafayette, Louisiana. So as Jeff Speck, a famous author, has pointed out, the question isn't whether people are going to be moving to the city. The question is whose city they're going to be moving to. Once again, I feel like we're holding one arm behind our back on this issue. We really need to get this high-quality city living. The good news is this is one of the ones we can actually control. There's a lot of things beyond our control. We can't control the overall energy industry. We can't control lots of things. We actually can control whether or not we do offer high-quality city living. And for us, after being here for a year, I can tell you that parking is the #1 issue. There's 2 elements to that. One I'm not going to talk about today, which is what we call parking infrastructure. The other is parking management. And I wanted to be able to talk about parking management, because right now we have sufficient parking downtown for where we currently are. But to meet the expectations of high-quality city living means we're going to have to turn a lot of surface parking lots into development where we have residences and things of that nature. And to do that, we're going to need the parking infrastructure. But like I said, we're not going to talk about that tonight. Right now, parking isn't what I would call actively managed downtown, and that means that we're not, we have static pricing, there's one price, it's during certain hours, et cetera, and we're essentially not generating revenue. We went back and studied the financials for parking over the last 3 years, and essentially it's a wash. The amount of money that's coming in sort of covering the operations and other things. And what we'd like to be able to see is that the actual revenue gets generated that can actually add improvements. Whether those improvements be parking infrastructure, helping seed that, streetscape improvements, or equally important, just think about one of the reasons some people don't come to the downtown or park in, let's say, our parking deck, is that not because the parking deck is not well lit. The parking deck can be well lit, but it may be that the area between the parking deck and where they're coming from, they don't feel safe. So the whole idea is to charge, an amount of money for parking when demand is high that allows us to catch this excess revenue. So let me talk about the key things that would be required. And by the way, parking is like a utility service. A lot of people don't view it this way right now, but the cities that are really capturing this recognize it's like water or electricity or gas or anything. If you don't have it, you can't get development. That's why we're primarily, we haven't seen a lot of residential projects in the downtown area. So we're looking to turn this into a utility. So what would be the four things that we would look to do downtown? The first is to implement modern technology. So right now, this is our current technology, and this is, decades old. This is essentially the 20th century model where if you want to, let's say, come visit a friend downtown, you've got to bring some quarters with you if you don't want to run into the parking meter trouble. So what are other cities doing? They're allowing other forms of payment, essentially credit cards. They're allowing you to do it over your phone, all sorts of things along that nature. So that's one of the immediate things on technology. The second issue that's really important for management is sensors. This allows you to be able to begin to understand where the demand is, so that ultimately the goal is always to be able to provide an on-street parking space for a visitor. You don't want to be in the position where the person who's coming downtown has no place to park. So sensors are a good way where through technology and computers we can actually monitor it. The third element and the final element I'm going to talk about on technology is just having apps. And with so many people having smartphones, it's very easy today for people to find in other cities where a parking spot is simply by using their app. So we could do that. The second upgrade that we need is what we call supply-demand pricing. And that's essentially what's known essentially as the 85% rule. The idea is to go ahead and make sure that there's always within a block's distance of wherever you're going an on-street parking space. And if there's great demand, the price would go up for the parking spaces. If there's not, it stays at the bottom floor level. Right now, we don't have the greatest demand for parking, so it's really not that big of an issue. But as we add development downtown, this is going to be a bigger and bigger issue that we're going to have to address. So now the other thing to recognize is the downtown isn't just one monolithic place. It actually consists of various sub-neighborhoods. So there's sub-neighborhoods where there's not going to be any parking demand for a while. There's other neighborhoods like Jefferson Street. I can tell you at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night has great demand for parking, so much so that the private sector steps in and provides it 3 or 4 blocks away for $5 to $10. So that's a really important thing for us, just for the convenience of our visitors. The third critical element is what we call revenue reinvestment, and that's what I was talking about before, and that is if there's any excess revenue, and there should be if you're actively managing parking based upon the experience of other cities, that revenue needs to be reinvested into that area, as opposed to generally going back to the general fund. Right now what happens is the revenue gets thrown in the general fund, then the general fund goes back and pays money to the parking department. And so there's no incentive to actually capture the value of parking downtown. So what we should do is follow the model of other cities. Old Pasadena was actually, in California, was the first city to actually do this on an aggressive basis. And it was, if they didn't do it, they could not have gotten the support of the business owners. And by the way, we have reached out to our business owners, and they're generally supportive of what we're talking about. At least I haven't heard any objections yet. Time will tell. But the bottom line is that the investments to upgrade to these different technologies or these different systems are a true investment, in that it's not just money you're throwing out that you never get back. It's actually going to be something, it's not a gift. It's actually something that if we spend money on upgrading parking meters or providing the software for sensor management or any of these other things, it's something that will immediately be able to kick money back in to pay for those investments. It just won't pay for it overnight. So that's the important thing. So those are or actually the fourth thing is a parking management plan. That's just saying there is no current parking management plan with the parking department. This would outline where the needs are for different users. An employee of a business downtown has different parking needs than a visitor or somebody coming to buy something, which is also different from a resident. And so parking management plans essentially identify where you have your parking spots essentially, and then manage them based upon the different needs of the different users, as opposed to trying to create a system where everybody's treated exactly the same. So that's going to be something that we're going to go ahead and advocate that the parking department undertake, and we think that that will make the system even more efficient. So that's basically it. The next step, once again, this was just a courtesy presentation to give you an idea of what's coming down the road for us. We're going to be working with the parking department, and we want to come up with a plan that really makes sense for taking us into the 21st century on this particular issue. I'm happy to answer any of your questions that you might have now.
All right, we have a few questions. Councilman Bertrand.
Nathan, I wonder if there's any way to quantify the value of a parking space in our downtown, whether it be from a real estate perspective or a cash revenue perspective. And the reason I ask that question is I'm one that would propose that, or that I would like to see that in some areas where we have on-street parking, that on-street parking would be taken in to give a retail space an opportunity, say for a restaurant, to have on-street seating, and how you would compensate for that. And if there's any way we can come up with a value of on-street parking in Lafayette today, and how that might be quantified for our plans in the future. And it's just a question. I don't expect you to have an answer for it, but I would believe that there is a way to quantify that, whether it be by a square foot price or what have you.
The way that it's done in the industry is to go ahead and essentially identify those specific costs on a per space basis. So it's not a per square foot, it's a per parking slot. And that's what you do during the parking management plan. When you come up with a parking management plan, they actually identify the numbers. The numbers can, in certain cities, can be as much as $40,000 per space is the value. But you have to, what it would be here in Lafayette, I'm not sure. That's an important issue, though, as we start looking at development occurring downtown with residents, okay? Because there is a value on, with the on-street parking and how we manage that. So I think it's something we can do. As it regards removing on-street parking in favor of outdoor dining, that would be handled from our perspective on a case-by-case basis based upon where it makes sense to do it. There's some places where it does make sense to do it. There's other places where it's not. Generally speaking, our default setting is we want as much on-street parking as possible to accommodate, the full needs of everybody. But we also need on-street dining, and we don't have sufficient right-of-way in most places to make that an easy thing. If we had 120 feet right-of-way like Salt Lake City does, it'd be real easy. We could build sidewalks that are 50 feet wide and accommodate all that. We don't have that. So looking to where we can place those downtown, I think, is part of the overall, equation. But I think it definitely has application in several areas downtown.
Well, I've seen it done even in areas that didn't have the right-of-way, but there was a cost involved, obviously. And that's one of the reasons why I'd be curious to know if you can quantify a value so that you can determine how you might pay for that, even on the short term, but certainly in the long term.
I think as we move forward with an actual proposal of how this will work, we can go ahead and identify those costs for you.
Thanks. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, Councilman Boudreau.
Mike, can you come forward, please? And Nathan, if you don't mind, can you bring up your screen where you had your final four factors as it relates to the objective of our discussion today?
Is that the slide you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
For some reason mine isn't coming up. Mike,
Yes, sir.
I guess my first question, but it seems like 1 and 2 in particular, well, 1, 2, 4 are things that I would assume the division and the department actually do, but seems to be somewhat an antiquated process or something. Let's start with pricing. What has been the protocol for determining meter rates, parking prices up until this point? How has those been determined if it's assumed now that it's undercharged, if you would?
We normally look at, or we do an analysis of other cities within the state or peer cities. We haven't in the past, I think the last time we did a rate increase was maybe 07, 08. And we haven't really looked at what the private sector is charging for, like those parking, those on-street parkings, those service lots, excuse me, that park in the downtown area, that $5 or $10 an hour for certain events. We haven't priced ourselves against those, but more so with like Alexandria or Baton Rouge or Shreveport, Monroe charges.
Like
That's
apple for apple, public versus public, as opposed to a
Yes,
local
sir.
comparison with public-private. Do you see, as a manager, do you see or have you experienced any, I guess, pushback, if you would, in an attempt to raise fees, raise rates, raise prices as it relates to parking? Has it just been as simple as, these are what our peer cities are doing and therefore we want to be in line with that? Or has there been a consideration to say, look, we charge, our fees are extremely low, we need to up them, and then there was opposition, whether it was from those people who frequent downtown, whether it was from this council, this council, or administrative, whatever. Has there been any pushback to say, this is why we're at these fees for no other reason than we could
No.
not justify, we don't have
I don't think that we
data,
ever
or-
received any pushback, as you mentioned, based on because they're so low. And, excuse me, when we did increase the rates in the garages, that 5-6 years ago, there wasn't any big uproar about we're going from $1.50 after 6 o'clock to $2.50 after 6 in the garages. I think most people, excuse me, that we experience in the downtown users would rather, in the meetings that I had with some of the business owners and the people who frequent downtown, they'd rather pay more if they were going to see that there were improvements made to the facilities, rather than just keeping it at the same low price. Based on what we see in those after hours, that $5 or $10, there's not an issue in terms of the public paying for those things. They apparently seem receptive to paying those increased costs because they feel as though, look, I'm going to have security. There will be someone watching over my vehicles. It's a well-lit area. I think that plays more of a role in what they're willing to pay.
Okay, and I think you just touched on the revenue reinvestment is basically what would be covered there. And the monies that you all collect comes to the general fund. The general fund basically covers the division in that operation.
Right.
Have we ever, as a government, looked at the cost associated with, I realize parking expands beyond downtown, of course, so that's one, I guess, area or component of it, but have we ever, have you had the opportunity to compare what our expenses are based as opposed to the revenues we're taking in specifically for the purpose of parking? And of course, that's our personnel, our metered folks, the whole 9 yards.
I know that we've actually looked into some privatization of some components of the system, of that division. But I don't know how much in depth we got in terms of, okay, well, it cost us, we receive this amount of dollars from either our parking fees and fines, and it cost us this other amount of dollars to run the system. I don't believe that that has been done. I could be wrong, but I don't think that we've done that since I've been in charge of the division.
Okay. My final question, something like technology, which I don't know if I would be a big proponent right now because Councilman Castile and I got locked in a parking lot downtown the other day because they wouldn't take our credit card. But,
It was maxed out. What happened? We don't get free parking.
for instance, something of that nature, I think this was, the lot across from the Chase Bank, I'm assuming they no longer have a man in the booth. You come out, you take your ticket, you resubmit your ticket, you put your credit card in there, the gate opens. Why aren't we there? What has held us back in this area of technology? When a proposal like this comes forth and, we such a progressive community, a progressive city, what has it been? Is it vision, I guess? Is it cost, government? Is it because we're government and we're not private? And, sometimes I know we would like to do a whole lot of things, but when people see the dollar behind it, it's like, why y'all spending money on that type? Why wouldn't we have those types of meters in this day and time as we have been planning over these years?
I don't think, years ago, probably another, again, 5 years ago or so, we did have some funds that were identified for improvements into the two garages. Not necessarily the on-street stuff, but in the Vermillion garage and the Buchanan Street garage. And the amount of funding that we had identified for gate improvements and central pay stations and that stuff, we just underestimated what that was. And we could not get sufficient funding to go back out or to even go out initially for to bring us up to the current age, so to speak. That's going to be staffed.
So that's an example there of, I guess, one of the hurdles that we'd have to cross. When you come to us with an RFP that reflects a dollar amount that's going to be, especially initially, is going to be somewhat extensive, it's about selling it to this council and having this council be willing to honor this demand that's being presented to say, invest that money.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, it is, there's no denying the technology that we have in place and in use right now is antiquated, and we do the best with what we have.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's on the revenue side, and in terms of the meters and the garages, it's on the enforcement side, and in terms of how we issue the citations and such, how we track all that stuff. All of that it does work. It's just that it's not as progressive as you can say, as you mentioned earlier.
Right. Final question, as our manager, obviously, is it safe to say that you support and you think that this is the direction that this government needs to be going, in particular as it relates to downtown? But again, parking expands beyond that. The technology improvements, getting to the point where we could start reinvesting in our parking systems, the evaluation and assessment of fees that are paid, whether it's garage parking or what our meters actually cost. I know there was some talk, I think we had a conversation about nighttime meter usage, because I think at this point our meters for the most part basically shut down.
We don't collect after 6.
After 6.
Yes, and we don't enforce either.
With the exception of those businesses fronting Jefferson that basically wants to offer the valet service.
That's correct.
Right, so we're doing some things, but this is where we need to be. And do you envision something coming in this next budget cycle?
I think that's our plan, is that if we can try and move something on our department request list. This is only this will be our second year in Public Works, and in the previous group that we were associated with, we ranked projects according to what the department deemed as most pressing for the department as a whole, and then we did a rank order. I'm certain that we'll do something similar to that, but it is something that I would certainly propose that we do. It's been a long time coming, and we've been working with Mr. Norris and his staff. We'd like to do that.
All right, thanks, Mike, I appreciate it.
Okay. Mr. Stanley?
Mr. Boudreaux, just to amplify very quickly, and it is a discussion of a change in philosophy. After seeing Mr. Norris's proposal, you'll recall that Mr. Trammell had talked about during previous budget hearings about the potential either for upgrading technology to meters that were more user-friendly, but the overall philosophy of having a private vendor or perhaps another public entity manage the parking component. So we felt like we were certainly to the point where Nathan needed to come to you and kind of gauge the council's temperature on where we are with that. And we'll see. There's a potential for LCG certainly to upgrade the technology. That has to happen. The old meter heads have to go, and that has to give way to a new way, as well as ingress and egress for the parking garage. Whether we enter into a cooperative endeavor agreement with DDA or a private vendor, and there are several that manage parking for communities, is yet to be seen. That's a philosophical change, and that's a policy change, but we felt like it was significant to let you know what's out there and what we're looking at. But
Okay.
no decision made today on which direction we're heading.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Terrio?
Mike, if you don't mind, currently at this point, do you think we are charging the appropriate rates for parking?
No, not based on what we're seeing. Not based on what I see when I go around the state and in other parts of the country, and not from what I see as being charged in the outlying areas, well, in the non-public lots in the downtown, no.
Okay.
And actually, you know what, let me clarify, in the downtown as well as like around campus, St. Mary, places like that, Lafayette General area.
Okay. And also, if I'm not mistaken, didn't parking rates recently go up? Weren't they adjusted a number of months ago?
About 2 years ago, if my memory serves me correctly, we did increase it. I think we increased fines.
Was it 2 years?
I think it was last year.
In a long time. I thought I'd remember something like that. Okay. Now, with the parking rates that you're looking at, would there be, as Mr. Norris mentioned, when you look at the value of a space, would you have, or can you have some spaces that are more expensive than other spaces? And how would you track that?
I think you can have anything that you want, Mr. Terrio, if you so desire. It's up to it. I mean, I guess it's up to the administration and the council what they choose to do. But yeah, no, I mean, you'd have zones, is what I would think you'd have.
Now, you had mentioned earlier, Mike, that most of the businesses I think you'd heard of were more or less saying that they would like to see reinvestment in structures and things like that, other than parking areas.
The Buchanan garage is, it's barely, it needs a lot of work. I'll be politically correct. And so, Vermilion is in pretty good shape, but it's a 30-year-old structure, and they don't last forever. And so Vermilion is a little bit better than Buchanan, but there are things that we just need to do to make improvements, from elevators to walkways, lighting in the facilities, and we had done that. And we've been funded to make those security level improvements and those site improvements, but still there's more that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Mr. Norris, you had mentioned earlier about the plan, and that in the plan, and I guess the discussions that you have had in presenting this forward, do you guys have a number of parking structures that y'all may consider or wish to be built in the downtown area, if it's even feasible?
We're working on those plans. Essentially, pursuant to the comprehensive plan, there's a thing that's called the Downtown Strategic Framework Plan, and we're working with the consultants right now on that plan. Part of that involves identifying essentially sub-districts of the downtown. Like there's the Le Centreville is what we call the area where the parish courthouse on the main street goes all the way to where the old federal courthouse is, and that's one little area. Because what we know is that in a downtown, people are willing to put up with certain inconveniences. One of those is not to be able to drive right up to your front door, especially if you're on the fourth floor, although some people want that. And, but they're unwilling to walk necessarily 3 blocks away in order to do that. So what becomes important for us from a planning perspective is to identify potential locations of where parking infrastructure can be placed. And we're in the process right now of identifying those areas, but more on a sub-district by sub-district or sub-area by sub-area basis. Now, how those get built vary from place to place. In some cases, we have a landowner that owns a substantial amount of land, where the private development that gets created will essentially be all on that one landowner's land. Well, in that case, the private landowner may be able to generate the parking infrastructure just through the pro forma on the real estate development deal. But what if I'm just have one lot? Okay, and I'm part of a bigger block. I can't afford to go build my own parking structure. And that's why we have a lot of, because our downtown was never intended to be the 5-story downtown that a lot of the landowners perceive their property to be today. Right. Instead, it was only designed to be a town that could support 1- and 2-story buildings for the most part. That's why we have so many surface parking lots right now, is that they're supplying the taller buildings that were never originally envisioned in our downtown. So the key is to populate those smaller lots with buildings that will be able to, within a block's distance, be able to enjoy some sort of parking structure. And that's why I say parking is like a utility. Just like I, as a small landowner, don't have to build my own power plant. What I'll do is I'd expect some third party to be able to construct it, whether it's public or private, and then I enter into a long-term fee arrangement, essentially, where I'm paying for it over time. The downside right now is that it's not a great investment to build parking garages if your window is on the banker's timetable of 5 to 7 years. Instead, it's more like a 20-year return. So finding that patient capital is going to be one of the things that we'll be looking at as we incorporate these ideas into our overall plan.
And also, I know Mike had mentioned about the businesses. I'm sure you and your group will take into consideration the business concerns, and you're having discussions with them also in dealing with the parking issues in that area.
Absolutely. Like I said before, we have very few residents living downtown. So our primary constituency base are the businesses. And so that's the first step that we took, as we went out and spoke to several of the key business leaders downtown and said, I don't know if you think this is a radical idea, but we believe that we need to go down this path. And their perspective is like in any other city. So long as any revenue excess comes back to that district, they're happy. Now, if the revenue excess goes to some other place in the parish, then they're not going to be too happy, and I don't blame them. That's why we included number 3 as a required upgrade in this particular instance.
In a time frame, I guess, are you and the administration hoping that this might be completed by?
Well, that's a good question. It's never completed. It's an ongoing, dance that you have to play. So it's never, parking's, you can go to New York City, which is really a big city, and they're still dealing with these issues. It's an ongoing management problem. But what I'd like to be able to see as far as these 4 items is to get them funded in this year so that we can really get to work and implement them in the 2015 fiscal year.
Well, that was my question, actually. These items that you were talking about, parking, as you have, of course, expansions and that, you're always going to need more parking, as with anything. That's all I have for now. Mr. Norris, Mr. Mike, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Council, Mr. Terry. I have a question right quick. Can someone clarify for me, Mr. Stanley, I'm going to cue you in. When is the last rate increase that we had for parking?
We were just talking about that last year. It was, and before that it had been, I don't think anybody, 10 years maybe before that. before last year.
Okay, last year, what was the increase in, was it a decrease in time, same amount of money? What was it?
No, go ahead, Kate. 25 cents an hour. Mike, what's your memory?
It's that quarter.
That's correct.
25 cents for an hour? And what was it
That was
prior?
the increase.
No,
It was 25 cents.
yeah.
That's 50.
It's 50
Went
cents
from
down.
25 to 50.
It went up a quarter. Okay, I
Yeah.
just wanted, because the council was discussing it up here, and we just wanted to be sure. 50 cents for an hour. Okay.
And then we also had a fine increase. That was probably about 10 years ago or so.
Okay. All right, so prior to that increase last year, it was since 2008 or 9 before? Late 90s?
Long time.
Okay.
On the fees, but the fines was the early 2000s.
Okay, that's the fines. All right, I just wanted to be clear. All right, Councilman Boudreaux.
About a year ago, right?
When this meter was in effect, it was a dime for an hour. So,
Yeah, that predates me.
but it still works though. And matter of fact, I want to encourage anyone to deposit anything, but I don't have a key to get the money out, so. Nathan, devil's advocate here. Typically, when someone develops a business, they're going to provide parking for their constituents. Downtowns historically, they don't have that because of how downtowns are designed in public parking and things of that nature. Do you envision, or is there a potential, with DDA being a political subdivision, they generate taxes, for this build-out, for this upgrade technology, do you envision possibly a buy-in or a pay-in through DDA or downtown merchants or anything associated with downtown in partnership with LCG in the initial investment to deploy this type of infrastructure to satisfy this issue, address this issue, or is that over the top or too great a asking for something like that?
Well, obviously, I'd have to talk to my board about it. They're very supportive of this direction as it relates to the specific monies that would pay for the capital improvements. I doubt that, philosophically, as the CEO of the organization, I would not be opposed to the DDA paying for it if they get the revenue back. Because once again, this is not a throwing the money here and never seeing it again. The idea is that whatever infrastructure gets in place, then we're going to take the excess revenue to go back and pay for those improvements. So, from my perspective, we'd be interested in talking about how that would work so long as we can, get that investment.
Legislators are never at that table. That'll be those guys over there making the real big money. But I could tell you, I could foresee a partnership. I think the initial investment, because the beneficiary ultimately is going to be the convenience of those businesses, those operations, those residents. Certainly if LCG takes this on as a whole, and that initial investment is going to come from the general fund, well, now you have folks in every sector of Lafayette contributing to that, but not necessarily the direct beneficiary. Of course, we could go all the way down the line when we start talking about tax revenues generated, which,
right.
That's where we kind of close all deals at. But that initial investment, so I was just curious, if this is something that's like, we really need this, and these are the all of the benefits that will be reaped from it, and without obligating to anything, not even
right.
a percentile or a specific dollar amount, but it's kind of like that thing, put your money where your mouth is. If downtown says that this is something that needs to happen, we'll help start it. We don't want to finish it. We can't control it. We'll help start it because that's what we believe. That's what we know needs to happen. And then, you now have a public-private partnership, those types of things. But I was just curious to see.
I'm all for everybody having skin in the game.
Okay,
So.
good. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Boudreaux, that's it. Not seeing any of the council discussion. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving right along. Jeremy, can you please read the next item?
Saving Lafayette's main post office.
All right. Give the floor to Councilman Boudreaux to begin discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'm going to ask why I begin my comments. I'm going to ask Mr. Joshua Montgomery to come forward, and if there are any other members, employees of the United States Postal Services who would like to come and join, you could sit in those chairs or join at another mic. I want to begin by first, I think last time you were here, myself and Councilman Shelvin had to leave for an event that was taking place in Councilman Shelvin's district as it relates to a candlelight vigil, and we were not here to hear what you shared at that time. So I'm going to ask that you kind of just give an overview without giving the full, description of what you did, and then kind of put your request out, what it is you think that you need. And I'm going to share my research with this council and with the administration that I've done and see what we could do to help this situation out, okay?
Yes.
So if you could just introduce yourself for the record and
my name is Joshua Montgomery. I'm with the APWU. I'm the local president of our Lafayette main office. As you guys already well know, first I would like to thank Councilman Shelvin for attending the AMP study that took place in 2011. He had brought forth some great questions to our then district coordinator, and yourself, Mr. Kenneth Boudreau, for staying on top of this issue, because as you had noted in the Advocate article that the interest and the media coverage of this was winding down while this entire event was still taking place with our local post office. So I just want to thank you, gentlemen, especially for keeping a hands-on approach about the issue that we was concerning. From the prior meeting that I was at last month, I just wanted to, again, I thank you guys on the work that you was doing to support us. And I was trying to reach out to the rest of the council members about the ongoing events that was taking place. For example, just to summarize, everyone has skin in this game, like the previous gentleman said. All of your constituents are being affected by the mail processing services that we are providing our constituents in this area. There is no council member on this board without an employee that's being affected by this, and of course all your neighbors and friends and everyone in the Acadiana area, as well as individuals in the Lake Charles area. Just to give you guys a brief description of what's going on, everywhere from the Chafalaya Bridge on to the Texas state line is the area that we process mail for. Back in 2011, we had consolidated the Lake Charles facility into the Lafayette, Louisiana facility. Once we did that, we became responsible for the entire southwestern region of Louisiana. We're only one of the 4 remaining facilities in the state. Originally, that was 9 facilities. Okay, all of the other facilities have been consolidated without a peep. And the importance of that is because if you're not outspoken about this issue, if we don't reach out to our congressional members, especially Congressman Bustani, Senator Vitter, then we'll go the way of those other facilities. Thankfully, on the good news side, the situation that we're looking at is trying to fight to take our mail back. Recently, we received notification from headquarters that they're going to be putting the consolidation on indefinite hold and not shutting down any more facilities because they saw it necessary to review the consolidations that was taking place across the nation, which goes to tell me at least that they see something somewhere was going wrong with the originally plan that they had in place for consolidating all of these facilities. So basically, how does it affect then the average citizen? If I have to mail something to any of you guys or to my neighbor next door, it takes at least 3 days for it to leave Lafayette from being collected, being sent to Baton Rouge, processed, and to come back to Lafayette for us to process to be delivered to that neighbor next door. The way it was before we was consolidated is, if I sent that letter out that same day before 6:30, at our post office, our main post office, it would be processed that evening and sent out to your neighbor the next day. Now, it seems like it wouldn't be that much of an issue, but if you consider bulk mailers, the mailings for graduations, weddings, events, that means a lot to individuals whenever they get it a day late. I know firsthand from having been a previous window clerk that whenever customers are unsatisfied, you get to hear it the next day. So I just want to let you guys know, even though it seems like it's something simple, that service standard still means something. And again, Councilman Boudreau, I'd like to thank you for using the mail to send out your notification about the precincts. Just to let you guys know, yesterday we had a rally consisting of 13 to 15 employees in front of the federal district courthouse. That rally was to try and get the attention of Congressman Bustani's office to let him know that we were still here, because we've been getting the impression from some of our neighbors around the area that a lot of people have already assumed that we've shut down and closed. That's not the case. We're still processing mail. We're just processing mail that's coming from Baton Rouge to deliver to the areas around here. Now, the reason that the issue with Baton Rouge processing our mail is important is simple. If any of you guys had to use the Chaffalaya Basin during inclement weather, busy hours between 12 noon and 5:30 p.m., you know that there's quite a bit of traffic and there's a bottleneck there, okay? There is no reasonable detour from I-10 from Baton Rouge to Lafayette that you can take as an alternate route that won't cause delays. For example, when we had the winter ice advisory on the 28th and the 24th, we couldn't process mail for the entire 2 days simply because there was ice on the roads leading from Baton Rouge to Lafayette, and the bridge was shut down. Anytime that issue takes place where the bridge is shut down, we automatically shut down because of Baton Rouge's inability to be able to send trucks over that bridge. Okay, and the reason that's important is because if anyone has anything sitting there, that time that is shut down automatically adds on to the time that's currently the standard for our situation, 2 to 3 business days. Again, like I said, that creates logistical problems presented by the bridges. Baton Rouge and Lake Charles, Lafayette, they're processing our mail second to theirs, which any reasonable plant manager would do because they want to make sure their area get the best mail service possible. We're not being shown that same courtesy, obviously, because we were consolidated into their facility and Lake Charles as well. There was a news report back in 2012, I'm not sure if you gentlemen remember, but Lake Charles, the first day that we consolidated Lake Charles into Lafayette, they didn't receive mail that day. And that's because of the poor execution of these consolidations. That's the same thing that's taking place with Lafayette. And this isn't the first time that we were put in a situation where Baton Rouge had to process the Acadiana area's mail. Previously, a few years ago, we were sending mailings to Baton Rouge for them to process and was going through the same situation we're going through today of constantly receiving them back late. And that experiment was scrapped simply because they couldn't get the mail back to us in time. The other issue is concerning the proper procedures from our handbooks, which is the P408 for handling AMP studies and consolidations. Now, myself, I took it upon myself at the time back in 2011 to try and notify the congressmen, the senators, and council members that was interested in concerning our situation about the AMP process and procedures and how they weren't being followed by the Postal Service and following their own rules and regulations. One of the most important things is communication with the shareholders that's involved with the process, okay? Me as a union president, I haven't received one scrap of paper concerning how our consolidation was going on paper. I know you gentlemen, several of you gentlemen, Mr. Boudreaux, Mr. Shelvin, that I communicated this with were unaware of a lot of the things that was going on with the consolidation procedures and the reviews that was supposed to take place going through this process. That in itself is automatically a violation of their own handbooks. And one other situation we was looking at is the possible reversal of mail consolidation from Baton Rouge to Lafayette. And just some of the indicators are the service impact and the community impact. Now, the service impact I pretty much explained to you guys already with the logistical problems presented by the bridges and the handling of our mail and the timeliness of it. This community impact is important because, like I said, with every one of the districts, there's at least one employee in that district. If we happen to have these situations where they do decide to lift the hole and consolidate our facility completely, every last one of these employees will be forced to relocate, some even as far as to Shreveport. For our Lake Charles consolidation, several of their employees ended up going to Shreveport because there was no other place to put them. That also means these people got to sell their homes. That's less money for tax revenues for the areas, and that's less individuals to take in consumer goods and services from our area. So on that note, I would like to ask the council members if they have any questions concerning our situation.
Josh, let me just add a few things before they chime in, and because I'm going to be asking some things of this government. But, gentlemen, what I would share with you and Mr. Stanley is that it has become evident to me that Lafayette is being displaced for no lesser reason than we're not putting up the fight. New Orleans and Baton Rouge both, who are on the opposite side of the basin from us, the other side of the river, they're being able to maintain their locations for whatever reasons, and we here in the southern western portion of the state, are being, in my opinion, displaced. I personally think that we need to light a fire underneath this community, and we need to fight back. I was hoping Bruce from the chamber would be here, but I'm going to be asking our clerk to make a direct contact to the chamber, because I think it's important that the chamber make their members aware of, from a business perspective, the impact that's going to be had. He mentioned bulk mailers, among other types of mailings, the impact that this is going to have on their operations as well. It's no secret, we know the impact that the internet and technology has had on communications as far as letters from family members to family members and things of that nature. But the Postal Service operation is still very significant and important, in particular our main operation there on Mall Street. We did do a resolution previously, so I'm not going to duplicate that act, but I am asking that the administration generate a letter to specifically go to each one of our congressional delegates, expressing the concern that we have as a local government of the things that are taking place related to this specific issue. As Mr. Montgomery indicated, it does in fact affect everyone. I call it the 3 M's. There's delays in medicine, mail, and money. The retirees are going to get their checks later. Those people who order medicine through the mail is going to get their medicine later, and just your general mail in itself. I think it goes directly to a quality of life issue. The second concern that I have is a facility. If the operations continue to be watered down at that location, we will then have arguably the largest abandoned public facility in the entire state of Louisiana, and that will just be unacceptable, and that cannot happen. We cannot afford for that to happen in that community where it's located. I was hoping Mr. Blanchard would have stood around as we continue to work on this comprehensive plan, because those are some of the type issues that we need to be talking about. We cannot allow that facility, if the operations go, we know what happens when your operations get minimized. The building goes abandoned and it goes unutilized, and that will be bad and detrimental for that part of town. So I cannot afford to see that happen. But most importantly, the jobs that are there. And Mr. Montgomery alluded to it, and I actually, we did a little research and find that actually every district, employee-wise, of course, District 4 has the most at 32, but District 2 has 13. Districts 5 and 10 each share, Districts 5 and 6 each share 10 members. District 7 has 7, District 3 has 6, 8 has 1. So, everybody's affected. And we're talking about jobs, we're talking about families possibly either having to relocate, or we're talking about a head of household or a spouse having to travel large distances just to maintain a job and possibly establish and do residency. So I think there's every reason on the table why this government needs to lead the way. I'm not asking us to become the post office. I'm asking us to join in this fight and make our congressional delegation know how sensitive an issue this is to us and what impact it could have. This is another one of these issues, the I-10, I-49 card in that major intersection there. This is another one of these issues where it's no reason that should not be the focal point for any and every operation in the state of Louisiana. The only 2 interstates at that intersection that'll take you to each coast, both north, south, east, and west, all 4 edges. So I think we need to fight. So again, my askings are a letter from the administration in representation of this entire government, media announcements to bring additional awareness and to try to get a greater engagement from our residents and our businesses to make them understand what's about to happen. If it shuts down, it'll be too late. What I have been told and what has been shared with me is that we're still at a point where the equipment, the processing equipment is still in place. But historically, once that equipment leaves the building, it's over. It never comes back. So we still at a good point. I think you sent me an email sharing that Senator Vitter at least possibly has agreed to have an audit done of the process being used?
Yes, sir.
Could you share that with us, please?
At the town hall meetings of, some of you guys may have been made aware of this, the New Iberia Town Hall meeting that Senator Vitter had last week in New Iberia at the New Iberia Regional Airport, he made the commitment to us that he would be able to at least submit an audit to the USPS OIG Audits Director to see if they would be able to at
You're
least.
going to have to break that down, because, tell them exactly who that is.
Well, basically, the OIG Audit Director is the individual responsible for ordering the procedures and the process being followed whenever you consolidate a facility. Okay, Senator Vitter and Congressman Bustani had already sent out a letter to the USPS concerning the audit and the review, but he had never heard anything back. Senator Vitter made a similar request and said that he was going to try to resubmit one to the OIG department to see if they would be able to audit the process.
Okay, so there is a light still there, and I think we could really enhance that if we take action. And that's what I'm asking for, is that we do everything that we possibly can to increase awareness, increase the level of engagement of our constituents, business and individuals, as well as make a clear announcement through the form of a letter to Senator Landrieu. I mean, we have the articles in the documents, her last visit of the post office, her commitment to saying she believes that Lafayette should remain open. A lot of times, as officials, we say some things that we intend to, but if there's no push, some things fall by the wayside. It's our responsibility to keep this issue alive. I guarantee you all have seen it before. If these operations stop, and once we start to feel the crunch, it's going to be too late to do anything. So that's what I'm asking for, Mr. Stanley. If you could, I would ask that, Madam Clerk, please, I want to make sure that we send the minutes of this meeting, and I would like a notification draft to the Chamber of Commerce asking for their support, and I would like Mr. Montgomery's information to be placed within that, and where he could possibly go and present to the Chamber Executive Board, where they could be made aware as soon as possible of any and everything that's going on related to this matter. I think if Lafayette stands up on this issue, we could possibly salvage some things, but if we sit on our hands, we're going to be in trouble. Okay? Is there anything else, Mr. Montgomery?
The only thing I would like to add, and this is for the sake of the employees that work there, we're the #1 processing facility in the state and always have been since this entire process has been going on. The workers there have worked diligently to try and do their best to keep the facility open. We just need the assistance from you guys and our elected officials to try and help us push the issue and keep the issue in the
And when you say #1, that's by rating. That's when they come
Yes.
in and rate your facility.
Exactly. The performance level of the facility compared to the other 4 facilities in the state, we're #1 in the state and one of the highest ranked in the region, the Southwest region.
What are the 4 facilities? Shreveport, Lafayette, Baton Rouge, New
Lafayette,
Orleans?
Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. Yes, that's the last 4 facilities left remaining.
That's all I have for
Okay.
now. If any other council members have questions.
All right, Councilman Sheldon.
Thank you. How you doing, Mr. Montgomery?
How you doing, Mr.
Good,
Sheldon?
good. Appreciate your diligence in this effort. I really appreciate and commend you for all that you've been doing with this battle that you've been fighting. Just a couple of questions. What's the employee strength at the main facility? About approximately how many employees?
Currently, we're working with approximately 50 employees. The facility as it stands right now, due to vacancies, is understaffed.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And what's the total in city, including
The
carriers?
total in the area that I'm over would be 134.
134?
At the last count.
I heard you mention Congressman Bustani and Vitter. Has Senator Landrieu been involved in this process?
Well, as Councilmember Boudreaux brought up, she had been involved with our facility. She had came and visited along with Councilman Boudreaux and stated her backing of keeping the facility. She had been occupied, her and Mayor Landrieu as well had been occupied with trying to maintain the New Orleans facility as well, because they was under consolidation, and they were successful in being able to get New Orleans off of the consolidation list, so that way they was able to keep their full mill processing capacity.
Okay, maybe this year may be a good year to re-engage her again in making sure that
Certainly.
the administration would help her keep that off the endangered species list.
Yes,
So,
yes, I agree.
well, look, thanks for all you do. I appreciate it.
All right, and thank you for your help, Councilman Sheriff.
Okay, thank you very much. Not seeing anybody else.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate it. Thank you again. All right, moving along. Jeremy, can you please read item number 8?
Eviction process, mandatory cleanups, removal of household contents, roadside debris.
All right, this time I'd like to recognize Councilman Boudreaux once again. All right. Come on. All right, there you go, buddy.
All right. Thank you. This is the second time I bring this issue up, and we really didn't get any movement on it last time. So let me kind of, I guess if we could do a recap and see where we're going to go this time. We're going to try to get some specific requests in place. The first thing I would like to say is that this is a solution finding process. There's a problem that exists. It has existed for quite some time. There are some things that are mandated by law, but as a government, I am committed to finding a solution. And basically, it's directly tied to evictions. And when evictions are executed, the contents that are taken out of the home by law, place that curbside at your mailing address. And the marshal is here, and last time he was here, he shared with us, and he could certainly speak to that if necessary, that the state law requires that you put the contents of the house at the curb address of that resident. What we as a government have to realize is that we're talking about rental property. We have to apply such things as our current household garbage collection process and what impact that has as it relates to active utilities. We have to look at the responsible parties. Is it the landowner or is it the tenant? In this place, the tenant becomes absent immediately. We have different policies as it relates to city limits in the unincorporated area. That's why I've asked the sheriff to be here, and along with the justice of the peace and the constables are also represented here because they are the ones who execute evictions in the unincorporated areas and in our parish area. I am comfortable and confident that when a landowner, a landlord is collecting $600 or $700 or $800 or more worth of rent a month, that when it becomes necessary to put that individual out for, in most cases, non-payment, but there are other reasons, that the cost to assure that the community that this place exists remains clean should be on that landowner. Now, they could do it by contract or they could do it themselves. But I could tell you, if we was to all get in a bus today and drive to the corner of Drain Street and Taft, you will see items stacked approximately 6 feet in the air and about 12 to 15 foot wide, and it's been there for 3 weeks. Okay? Now, let's be clear. It's not that no one didn't do their job. It's just that there's no mechanism to deal with this issue. And typically, a situation like that is dealt with when that particular landlord rents to the next person, that person will then dispose of it, okay? Now, just a couple of reminders. If you don't have utilities, your garbage don't get picked up. Even if you have utilities, if it's not in a container, it will not get picked up unless it's legitimate brown good or white good on a designated day. But most of these places, the utilities are being cut off, and it's an absentee location. The marshals, the constables, the justice of the peace, they're going to do their job. If the sheriff has to go out in the parish to monitor a situation that may be a little incorrigible, they will do their job and make sure that the peace is kept and everything is taken out. But that's, as I understand it, their only job. Once the items are out there, we're now fighting stray animals, inclement weather, homeless population, and the general conditions of the neighborhood. Once the bag gets open and the wind picks up, it's everywhere. Once someone goes through it looking for a jacket or a long sleeve shirt, it's everywhere. Once someone goes through the pile and knocks something in the street, now the vehicles have to be diverted to get around it. It's a legitimate safety issue. I am not trying to create a cost for anyone who, although they are running a business, if this could be done without cost, so be it. But I think it's time that we become proactive with this situation and say, look, we're trying to clean up our communities. We're trying to clean up our neighborhoods, which has been difficult enough in itself, that when these evictions are executed, that we should do something about it. So I have asked, again, EQ is here, PZC is here, the marshal is here. I don't know if the sheriff office is represented, but environmental quality is here, allied waste is here, justice of the peace, and the constables. And I'm open to suggestions. If anyone has, what I'm asking for today from you all, if anyone has any ideas or suggestions, or if you think that by doing something of this nature it will be in conflict, I would like to know, because I'm going to be specifically asking for an ordinance tonight. I'm going to be specifically asking for some policy changes to take place when someone applies for an eviction notice, and at both of our courts, and I'm open to meeting with landlords and anyone who may want to serve on a committee to address this issue. But we need some answers, and we cannot delay this anymore. So that's the purpose of this discussion item. Last time we talked about it, I'm sure it'll happen again tomorrow, and that's fine. I got calls from landlords, but nothing changes. Nothing changes. So I guess the first person I would like to call up is the marshal. Thank you for being here, Marshal. We know you could actually be out campaigning right now. But the workday continues. If you could give us an overview, because the marshals were on site that day, and everything went well, because I passed by when it was happening. Tell us, what is your obligation when an eviction? Do they apply to city court clerk for an eviction, or do they apply to the marshal's office for eviction? And once that happens, what is your charge?
Okay, the landlords have to give a written notice that they want them out. That's the first thing. If the person doesn't vacate the premises, after 5 days, 10 days, depending on how the lease is written, if it's month-to-month rent, it's a 5-day deal. But you can't include, you gotta exclude the weekends and holidays. So that 5 days could go to 11 days, depending on time of the month and if the landlord moves. If they don't move, then the landlord has to apply for a rule to show cause why he should not be evicted. So they have to go before the courts. Has to be a judge. It's a judgment, and only a judge can give a judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So the landlord has to come in and say, hey, Mr. Picard didn't pay his rent, I want him out. And the judge orders the warrant, orders the judgment. 24 hours to move, Mr. Picard. If I don't move, then there's a warrant of possession. That comes to the marshal's office. When the landlord calls and says, hey, I got my warrant of possession, I want him out. So we go there and keep the peace and get him out. And when you look at the statute, there's nothing really defined in the eviction statute that says where to put the stuff and who pays for it. It's Attorney General opinions. And we work on the opinion that it goes to the nearest neutral ground. Now, how many neutral grounds do we have in Lafayette? How many neutral grounds do you have on North Pine or on Drain? So they put it as near to the curb as possible. The law requires that we give the landowner his building and his property. So if we leave it on his property, then we're not abiding by the law.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Now, the most recent thing was in 2004. It's an Attorney General's opinion. If the lessee doesn't vacate after 24 hours, the lessor can vacate him, and the lessee pays for that property to be moved. Well, he can't pay his rent, how he's gonna pay the other thing? Okay, now, Mr. Pope and I talked about this, about the dumpsters. Where do you put the dumpster on some of these streets? Unless you put it in the street. Because there's no ditch, there's no shoulder, there's nothing. So, heaven forbid, but let's say there's an accident caused by that dumpster on the public right-of-way. Whose fault is it? Who's going to be sued? Who's liable? There are some problems. Now, if you go back in the statute, you're talking about laws that were written and talked about in 1927, 1938, 1939. It's an old law, and and I realize it doesn't fit with today's times, but it's the state law.
Well, I tell you, Marshall, you've already said two things that immediately changes this. The first was the neutral ground. And when neutral ground does not exist, which is common in a lot of the areas where rental popular is very abundant, then now you're putting it as close as you possibly can, and that's where some of these issues come in at. But then again, if there was a sidewalk, we would block the sidewalk. And because that would become that neutral ground out of the street but off the property.
Right.
And the other thing is that you give an interesting perspective that the law's objective, I guess, is to give the landowner his property back.
That's correct.
And that's very interesting to me, because the landowner, until at least that month, assumingly, or maybe it could have been over a 2 or 3 month course, and he or she was trying to be lenient, but they were the beneficiaries of that person being there, because they were making the money. They were operating the business at that location. But we do not see landlords necessarily as business people here in Lafayette, okay? So I want to put that out there. But if we're giving them their property back, and like you said, you and Mr. Pope spoke about where do we put the dumpster, I certainly had envisioned that if I was a landlord, I would have my trail out there possibly to avoid having to rent or lease a dumpster from a service provider. But I certainly was envisioning that the dumpster would be placed on the property. But you're saying that would be in conflict to the law because that would be occupying
That's correct.
the owner's property.
Right. You got the same situation.
We have a greater problem than I thought.
We got the same situation with these apartment complexes. They've got a dumpster on their property. But legally, can you vacate apartment number 208 because he didn't pay his rent and go put it in the dumpster that is there for the convenience of the other renters? So what we do, we put it near the dumpster, and that gives Mr. Guidry a problem, see? But we saddled, and where do you put it? And I understand that. Now, this probably worked years ago.
Right.
Now, you mentioned the JPs and the constables. Louisiana law is really funny, and we're going to have to go back to the Attorney General and say, hey, here's what you said in 2004, that it's not the lessor that is responsible to move the property, it's the lessee. And what y'all proposing possibly is for the landlord to do it. But it's in conflict with the Attorney General's opinion. But let's take French Colony, Gloria Switch. That apartment complex is in the city of Carencro. It was annexed into the city of Carencro. I wrote the Attorney General and got an opinion. When they annexed it into the city of Carencro, they did not remove it from the 3rd Ward. So those people, French Colony, not only vote for the marshal, they vote for the judge, they vote for the Carencro Council, they vote for the mayor, they vote for the JPs and the constables. It's still in the city limits of Lafayette, Louisiana. Now you go further down Wilderness Trail, you're still in the 3rd Ward of Lafayette. It goes all the way to Sinclair, to St. Martin Parish line. We get evictions back in that area, which is out the city. But it's handled by the marshal's office because they're in the 3rd Ward of Lafayette Parish. We cover 2 wards, the 10th and the 3rd. All of the 10th Ward is in the city. At one time you had these islands, but all this was corrected. So now we have this area east of Lafayette, which is in the city court jurisdiction, West Pontebuto. It's in our jurisdiction, it's not in the city.
Let me ask you something, Marshall. And I'm not at a point yet where I'm prepared to say that it should be the lessor or the lessee who is responsible. I'm trying to find somebody to be responsible.
Right.
Let me ask you this, and if you could opinion on this. When you do go out to execute, when it gets to the point, and let's be clear, percentage-wise, we're not talking about a whole lot of them.
Right.
Most of the people vacate, and even if you have to go out there, they'll take their belongings with them. In an instance where you are going to vacate someone because they have failed to do so themselves, do you have an idea how many of those folks have you all dealt with that intends to come back or left without taking their property, but they actually want it? Because, and this goes to the issue of, you know, we can't put it in the dumpster, we put it near the dumpster, we can't throw their property away, we got to get it off of the landowner's property, but we can't put it in any public necessarily rights of way as it relates to travel areas for safety. But it's almost like we're preserving it, like somebody's going to return to get it. Do you have a whole lot of those?
Yes. What happens to you have self-help evictions. They don't come to city court, they don't see the judges, they don't see me. We serve a 5-day notice to vacate the premises, or the landlord does it. They don't want to fight it. They're going to take their stuff, put it in the street and leave. So what happens to that? And most of that stuff is going to be trash.
Right.
And we see it. I've talked to Mr. Pope several times on Turlin's Drive, where stuff stayed out there 2-3 months. Sofas and chairs and household goods. What do you do with the white goods? The refrigerators and the stoves and everything. I think that maybe the city attorney should write the attorney general, send him a copy of the proposal, and clear up some of these
Mr. Richard, you got that?
attorney general opinions. Because they're going to be direct conflict with the state law until,
Yeah.
you know.
And I understand that. Let me bring up 2 more people, and then I'm going to open up the floor, and I want to hear some more of this because we're learning some additional things. Mr. Pope, could you come up? And Mr. Guidry, could you please come up? My question, my question to you all, because it become apparent that, you know, lessor, lessee, you all heard that comment. For us, we're talking about our communities. We're talking about making sure we're not in any travel rights of ways, but we got to get it off of the landowner's property. So if we can't do anything, if there is nothing available to us to address this issue by putting the responsibility on one or the other, because one is absent, he's gone, and one has the right to get his property back. Is there a possibility to see a contract amendment where this pickup becomes part of the government's responsibility? Because I'm not asking you to do it for free, but it becomes part of our contract.
Yeah, you pay for the contract right now. It's your responsibility whether the resident pays today the monthly charge. The Lafayette Consolidated Government takes responsibility to pay us for it, for that service. Currently, as normal residential service.
Right.
Yeah, the government takes responsibility whether the resident pays or not. It'd basically be the same thing, whether the leasee pays to collect that, and you can collect from them later. Within our contracts with Consolidated Government, it's not with each individual within the city of Lafayette or Lafayette Consolidated Government.
So if Mr. Pope calls and says, go and pick this up, you're going to go get it?
We're going to go get it, and
we're
we'll
going to
have
pay
a charge.
you, and then we have to collect.
We'll have a charge, establish a charge, and there are some provisions that allow for those charges to take place, correct?
Okay. Mr. Pope?
Well, let me first say we do have a law that addresses evictions. That's what you have in front of you. Section 7436. property owner is responsible, I'm not going to read it, but property owner is responsible for the maintenance of his or her property. And we have a procedure, Mr. Boudreau, when we see a mess, as it were, furniture, bags, boxes, we send a notice of violation from the Environmental Quality Division. We don't consider an eviction to be something that's exempt that we don't have a law on. This law has been, it was revised a little bit from that revision we did when you all approved the new Chapter 74 back in November 2013. This has been revised a little bit, but the bottom line is the property owner is responsible for removing that. And we send notices out. I don't have a tabulation on it, but we send quite a few out.
So, but what you're actually sending notices out on is when an inspector observes a large pile of removables at curbside.
Yes, sir.
So we don't have a trigger. So, and that was going to be one of my requests, is to update the information, in particular in this case at the city court or at the marshal's office, reflecting these requirements. And I don't know if Marshal Picard was aware of this or not, but to me, I mean, and I'm not that smart all the time, but if this was put in a package as a owner come forward to execute an eviction, to me, if this is in that package and they are made aware of it,
yes, sir.
One, I would think we would get more compliance.
Yes, sir.
But two, we would certainly know about these things because we're dependent on an inspection, and I don't think that the marshal would mind notifying LCG that an eviction is being executed at this address.
Yes, sir. We've...
Marshal, could you come back up, please? Were you aware of this in our codes by any chance?
Yes. I still have this problem with the opinion of the Attorney General said it's on the lessee, not the lessor.
Get closer to the microphone, sir.
Sir?
I just want you to get closer to the mic so they can hear.
In 2004, when the Attorney General issued this opinion, on the state statute, not an ordinance, state law, that clearing the property is not the lessor, is the lessee. It has to pay the expenses. And that's my only concern is, are we going to be in conflict with state law? And I think we need to clear that and venture.
Has the opinion, well, obviously it's just an opinion, so it's never been challenged in court yet.
Right.
But was that a situation where someone contested an action? That's what forced us to, I guess how and why was this opinion sought and by who? Was it based on some action by someone?
Well, it had to do with Article 4733 of the Code of Civil Procedure. It says here, removal of property. An owner, upon obtaining judgment of eviction, may have the evicted lessee's possessions, property cleared from the property by the sheriff, constable, or marshal at the expense of the evicted lessee.
It's in current parish ordinance, it says the owner or lessee.
Right, but it's in conflict with the state.
So our parish ordinance is in conflict with the state law?
Right, what I just showed him was your ordinance 74-36, and it says any owner or lessor shall be obligated. So this parish ordinance is...
Because the lessee is gone.
Sure, but he's being evicted because he didn't pay the rent. How's he going to pay for the movable stuff?
Right. And in most instances, they're gone. They're leaving.
And there may be an answer to it, but what is the answer?
Mr. Becker, and I'm going to put it in a request, but
Thank you.
we already have the opinion, so the opinion isn't the issue.
Are we basing the whole thing off an opinion?
Some people do.
Mr. Boudreau.
Yes, sir.
Let me make a comment. I was just talking to Mr. Pope. We already have an amendment in place that provides for the opportunity for us to pick up material like that. So there's no action that's needed as far as any kind of amendment to our current contract. We've already amended it once before, and I think it may have been that as a result of some previous discussions that we have. So as it stands right now, all we need is direction from Public Works, which is the person that directs us is Mr. Carroll.
I was glad Mark brings this. The only issue that I see now is that, again, as I understand it, is when they either a complaint is filed or if an inspector is doing their inspections and they cross it. I was looking for a greater trigger, and I think the trigger, Mr. Picard's concerns, I respect those. I would still ask that this be given at the eviction process and that the marshal's office notify us. Now, we can't hold, according to the conflict, I would think that Mr. Becker may opinion that we can't hold the lessor responsible now because it may be in conflict with state law, but it'll certainly give you the opportunity to inform Allied Waste at an earlier point, not depending on us to cross it. So there's still some benefit in that notification process that we could go get it. Now, ultimately, who we hold accountable, I'm going to ask if legal would look into this to see. We either going to have to ask for another opinion, opinions trump opinions, based on what we're trying to do here.
We'll be happy to look into it. I would tell you that typically when the Attorney General issues an opinion, it comes with the caveat that it is just an opinion, that it may or may not have the force of law until it's litigated or ruled on by a court. The second thing I would say is that as part of our analysis, we would look at to see whether or not whatever it is that is in our ordinance is consistent with state law, which is a requirement of our ordinances. We can't, state law will trump the issue, but I think we could look at it. And I think we will look at it and give you an opinion of where our ordinance should be.
Okay. Let me do this. Let me continue the floor for a second. I see there's a few other people. I know this is my discussion. Somebody might be able to help me out with this one.
All right, I give the floor next to Councilman Castillo.
Thank you, sir. Marshall, as a landlord, what you're telling me is if I get the eviction done through the process and you guys show up to move the stuff out, if I choose to put a trailer on my lot and put it in that dumpster, I'm violating the law as a landlord?
Again, it goes back to the...
Can you get closer to the mic?
According to the state statute that we're under.
It goes back to the opinion that is to be placed on the nearest neutral ground. So, now, define that for me. I just,
But my thing is, as a landlord, I've been through this, so...
Right.
And by the time this stuff hits the neutral ground, half of it's already gone. And the rest of it that Mr. Boudreaux was talking about is flying all over the yard. So that's why we bring dumpsters in and we move it off.
Yeah, you can be left with the trash.
Right.
That's
So,
what you got.
I'm curious, am I violating the law is if when you come to move the stuff out and I ask you to put in my dumpster or my trailer, is that a violation of state law? Am I violating the law?
Well,
because I want my property back, but it's the leasee's responsibility to pay for the disposal. Am I doing something wrong?
Well, that depends.
Not morally.
It depends on the Attorney General and the courts if they look at it. See? Because you taking possession of this man's property.
Exactly. That was where I was going with it. Exactly.
So,
So in turn, my hands are tied as a landlord. I'm taking that guy's stuff.
And you look at this statute, a lot of that stuff is exempt from seizure, even by court order. I can't seize household goods. I can't seize washing machines and refrigerators. I can seize TVs and what they call luxury stuff. And if you got two cars, I can seize one, but you got to have the other one. So that's how antiquated the laws are.
Yeah. So we
and they need to be looked at.
It brings up the question about if you direct me or Mr. Pope directs me to go pick it up, am I in violation because I'm picking it up? I'm seizing their equipment.
Exactly. And on the other hand is...
What gives Mr. Pope authority to tell me to pick it up? Yeah. I guess you're gonna have to do that.
If we have a slum,
Who's in violation when it's in the neighborhood and it's not picked up?
the
property owner.
The
The
landlord.
property owner.
According to your ordinance, the property owner.
Mr. Boudreaux,
And I got
that's
no
a
problem with that.
statewide problem. You want to see a big mess? Try to move a mobile home
Oh,
try
good
it
luck
out.
with that. I tried that.
and see what you got there.
I have no problem with our ordinance. I think as a landlord, I feel it's my responsibility to take care of that. I'm just one guy, okay? But if I'm violating the law by doing what I'm doing, you know, that's a slippery slope. And I shouldn't expect another person to pay a bill through Allied Waste to pick up my tenant's stuff that was left inside or on the neutral ground. And that's what's happening. We send it to EQ, Allied picks it up, everybody in the city pays for it. Shouldn't be like that. So I support Mr. Boudreaux's thought process. I just, on the other side of the coin, I don't want to violate the law because I'm gonna clean up my own mess. And if I am, then we need that clarification, I guess. That's what I'm asking for.
And Mr.
Somewhere.
Castillo, look, I want to be very clean on this, and that's why I'm asking for things. But I want us to be clean, and this certainly has become a little disturbing because it seems like everybody's being protected by law, even when they're violating a law. So what I'm going to ask Mr. Becker in this process, as legal addresses this issue, if it hadn't been made clear initially, what I would like to know is, Mr. Pope and Mr. Gidry says that we have a means that when that trash is out there at that curb, that our ordinances says it is the landowner's responsibility. If that garbage or that pile was generated from an eviction, does that immediately cause us some problems with our ordinance that landowner is responsible? Under that same circumstances, if it was the person who occupied the land was the landowner, it would be a no-brainer. But now, have we just tied Mr. Pope and Mr. Gidry's hand, if somebody really wanted to get in depth into this, because it was part of an eviction process as a part of me just doing a spring cleaning? So I guess we're gonna need to know that, because then it becomes mute, because now, Bobby, you're concerned that if you take possession of that you just took somebody, and I understand that. But I want a clean document, but I want a document, you know. Yes, sir.
One thought, Mr. Boudreaux, that Marshal Picard said, according to state law, the lessee is held responsible. I would venture a guess that a lot of these cases, the evictions happen for non-payment. So the lessee is not paying his rental bill, and yet you're going to hold him responsible for removing debris. The whole reason that environmental quality holds property owners responsible is because when they don't pay their bill, we lien their property. The lessee we have no way of recovering our money. And that's the problem. That's why our laws are written the way they are, to hold property owners responsible.
So what I'm hearing is that we need some state legislation to be enacted?
I was just about to ask, the last day to file bills is Friday. Mr. Stanley, who's our lobbyist for the state?
Picard.
We need to get a bill in by Friday. We need to get something filed.
It's an easy one. You just got to change lessee to lessor.
Yeah, change lessee to lessor.
You're hot?
Again, if you change the lessee to the lessor, Mark, the section of the code that you have, it occurs to me that's not a provision in the code that relates directly to this issue, that it's indirectly related to property maintenance, and is that correct? Or is it related directly to evictions?
I would say it's half and half. It's related to real-life issues that we, the Environmental Quality Division, experience, and that is there's an eviction and there is a mess at the street.
Then I go back to Mr. Becker's comment that we would need to do an examination of whether or not our existing code, as it relates to evictions at least, is in conflict with state law, or whether we as a home rule government would be able constitutionally to require that in the cases of an eviction. The Attorney General is rendering an opinion. That's just an opinion. So potentially, we have a lawyer that may have the same opinion, he may have a different opinion. If he has a different opinion, then the courts perhaps may be where we're headed, but we may not need the legislation at that point. So potentially, we would need legal counsel to determine whether we're actually in conflict. If he opines that we're not, then we need to proceed with collecting the fines or collecting the amount from. It also occurs to me that is there a way to tie this to the proceeding as it relates to the marshal? And at such time as an order for eviction is given, that there's a simultaneous, or as part of that order, or the request of the landlord for eviction, that as part of that order, when the judge orders the eviction, he also assigns cost to the cleanup to the city judge, to the lessor, based on our code.
Am I still hot?
I'm just thinking out loud. There's been a lot of thinking.
Right.
So.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, D brings up some good points. The marshal talked about the 5 or the 10 days, depending on how the lease is drawn. Notification, I think, becomes significant in this. I'm wondering if there's some language back to this lessor leasee thing. If there's a timeline, if your stuff, because you're getting a notice to vacate the property within a certain amount of time. You don't go out until that time expires.
I don't go until we get the warrant of possession signed by a judge.
And that from the time someone goes to your office to file for an eviction to that time, what's that average timeline, days-wise?
I'd say 15 to 18 days.
Okay.
And it depends on the lessor. If he doesn't file it, timely.
Right.
It could stretch more.
If he fighting it. But that's not the worst of the thing, because we got a warm body. We got somebody we could hold accountable. But in a simple, non-contested one, why couldn't those 12 to 15 days serve as a period of possession where if you don't come get your stuff, you wording or language be that you have abandoned your property. Therefore, this thing about we taking somebody else's property goes out the window.
Yeah, but Judge Saloom and I had gone to see Senator Michaud at the time to see if we could take those days and include it in the notice. And it can't be done unless the law's changed. See?
Okay. Shut me up, man, because I'm...
But,
Not a problem.
This law's so old, it doesn't fit in today's, but it's got to be updated or changed or corrected, something.
Hold on, Mr. Picard, we got a couple of more speakers. We got Councilman Andy Nakane. You got the floor.
Obviously, the problem is whose possessions they are, period. That's the bottom line. And I agree with Councilman Boudreaux that something needs to be provided in the eviction process where the leasee is given enough time to move their property off the property. If they don't do it within that period of time, then the lessor takes possession in lieu of payment of what is owed to the lessor, then the lessor becomes responsible for disposal of that property. I think that's what needs to be addressed and brought forward. I mean, given a period of time, the leasee should be able to take his property and remove it. Because at this point right now, even if you remove it from the premises, it's still the lessee's property. And that becomes a conflict for you guys. So I think within the law, there has to be something written where, given a reasonable period of time for the lessee to remove the property, once the eviction is enacted, then it becomes the property of the lessor, and the lessor does what he wants with it at that point. And he's responsible for disposal, keeping it, selling it, whatever he wants to do with it, in lieu of the monies that were owed to the lessor from the lessee, from not lack of rent or whatever he's paid. I think that's where we need to go with this.
Yes,
Richard, is language like that generally included in a lease?
You talking about between the homeowner and
what Councilman Nakane was just speaking of?
Councilman Andy.
That is, and maybe Jay, I should ask, if they bail.
No,
Is
I mean, I wouldn't.
I don't think
wouldn't
that could ever be
that's
done in a lease because
pretty typical.
legally you couldn't do that in a court of law. say, I take your property. You'd have to have a law that would say that, I'm sure. You know,
Well,
and
when you-
that's what needs to be addressed,
But
really.
again, a
When-
lot of that
when you-
property is
Never
exempt
mind.
from seizure by anybody. So
Mr.
you
Chairman.
can't seize bed linen and utensils and
It'd be nice if everybody just picked up their trash.
The concern about Councilman Boudreaux's comment also is let's get some legislation done, get it
Right.
done by Friday. Communities throughout the state must have been grappling with this for decades, but yet the law has not been changed. There
No,
has to be,
it's-
there has to be a reason for that.
It's an obvious problem.
Because it only affects certain communities to that degree. We know why laws don't get changed. It's not a high level of importance. I mean, this, with all due respect, I think it's of concern to everybody here when we bring it to their attention, but if it's not brought to their attention, you know, these things are pretty much isolated to poor communities where you have an abundance of rental property. And in areas where you have covenants and neighborhood associations, residential associations, those things are prevented from happening. But where those things fail to exist is in communities, and that's why it's just not a high level of importance. But, I mean, I'm going to be talking to my rep, and I realize that it wouldn't be appropriate to bring legislation that fast, because I'm actually, one of the things I'm going to be asking the clerk to do is do an announcement to get some landlords to chime in on this, to maybe come and sit with us, and I would like to hear what they have to say as well. But at the end of the day, if this don't become a matter of importance for someone, and I think it starts here, and that's why I brought it, but Don found some good stuff of interest.
Councilman Nakane, you still have the floor. You good? All right, moving next. Councilman Bertrand, you have the floor, sir. Got to hit your little red button. There you go.
Thank you. While you've been talking, I've been looking online at other counties and other parts of the country. And one of the things that I find common in other counties and other parts of the country is that, number one, they put a value on what gets left behind, and they have a separate paragraph that deals separately with abandoned property by the tenant. And yes, they deal with the execution of a judgment and they deal with the eviction process, but abandoned property is handled separately. And anything under $100 is tossed, anything over $500 is stored for a period of time, and if it's not collected, then it's disposed of or sold. I don't think we have any provision like that. And to me, that's one of the things that we have to do. We have to deal, and Mr. Nakane's right, it's a personal property issue. We don't want to take anybody's property. But if it's been abandoned, there should be a limitation on time based on what the property's worth, that they could come back and get it. And I'm sure quite often what you're dealing with, Marshall, and what you're dealing with, Bobby, is below $500 worth of value. It's just somebody left their trash behind for somebody else to pick up.
Usually it's about $500 of value to me because that's about what it cost us.
Well, and that's my point. The property itself may not be worth $500, but the cost involved in removing it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Bertrand. Not seeing anybody next.
Mr. Nakane.
Yes, sir.
One final comment, please, because Mr. Boudreaux said he's thinking out loud. I'll make it brief. You mentioned if I were the property owner, if I were the landlord, I'd have my trailer and I'd be loading it. Mr. Nakane said it too, if everybody just disposed of their trash. When you're talking about furniture and throwing in the